Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to Business is Boring. "90% of startups fail, but today's guests have worked with hundreds of startups in their journey and only had less than 5% not make it. They're Oxygen advisors, who, if you look behind most of the great names in the local tech ecosystem, you'll find Oxygen in there helping them as CFO partners, kind of like a virtual CFO. What does it take to work with high-growth companies, helping them capital raise, get their books in order, and spend money ahead of revenue in a way that makes them able to actually keep growing? And how have they been able to work with so many companies for such a good result? Well, to share the story, we have Matt Dold and Mike Mandis in now to talk about their journey, what's involved, and what makes for a great company. Tēnā koroa, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, awesome.
Hey, so how was that? Was that accurate? Like,
That was great.
Yeah, Joyce. Like that, it's such a cool stat that, you know, you have such a success rate with the people that you work with. As they're all, so many of them are on a bit of a kind of like tightrope walk, right, of the SaaS company. So first up, tell us a little bit about how you describe what you do as CFO partners.
Yeah, absolutely. So the term we often use is outsourced finance function. We're typically working with companies who don't need a full-time finance team. And they're often stuck in a sort of middle ground where they don't want to hire a full-time CFO. They can't afford that. There's not a full-time role there. Sometimes, traditionally, you might hire a more junior resource like a bookkeeper and kind of expect the outcomes of a CFO. Or you've got a really expensive resource of a CFO, but they end up doing a bookkeeping and not really having a full-time role. So we kind of bridge that gap from when you really need that support of all the layers of finance, from CFO to management accounting to bookkeeping to payroll, for those companies before they need it full-time. So our services cover everything from reconciling their bank accounts, doing their payroll, doing monthly reporting, right through to helping on the strategy like capital raising, entering new markets, pricing, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and the kind of companies you've worked with, like, I've got to know you from working with people like Tracksuit and Ideally. You've worked with people like Auror along their journey. And in some of these cases, you stay with the companies for a long time, and in some cases, you are there just for that first stage, right? But a big characteristic of a lot of these companies is that they are all having to keep raising money, so many of these things, to stay alive. And having your books and everything in order is probably the most critical thing to be able to walk that tightrope, hey? Can you chat a bit, Mike, about that tightrope walk?
Yeah, I think when you go to raise capital, it's probably one of the biggest red flags to not have your accounts sorted. If there's things in there that don't look right and you go out to an investor, like they're professionals, they look at the stuff all the time and then they see something that pops out as not looking normal, it will definitely hammer your chances of being able to successfully raise capital. But I mean, I guess the key part that we play in that journey is figuring out, okay, you have this pool of money that you raised. How long is that going to last you? When are you next going to need to raise money? Because a lot, like you say, a lot of the companies we work with are intentionally burning through their capital to grow really quickly. But at some point they will need to raise again and they need to be prepared for that. You want to be raising well before you actually need the money so you can go into it not out of desperation, but in a good position and ready to tell a good story and be quite a good opportunity for someone coming in rather than a desperate plea.
And, one last thing to probably cover off before we get into the story of how Oxygen Advisors began and grew is just the importance, I guess, of there's some magic metrics in the world of many of the companies that you work with. And we'll be talking, about B2B SaaS and, some of these kind of concepts. I think it's probably useful as well just to kind of set that context, right? Because a lot of these companies, it's absolutely fine if they're burning money as long as they're burning money with the right metrics, right?
Yep. Do you want me?
Yeah, you go.
So, yeah, like traditional business, you think about you sell like a physical good, you sell a widget, you make margin on that widget, and you're expecting to make profit. The companies we work with are venture backed usually, so they raise capital, and they usually work on a recurring revenue or a long time revenue model where you are extracting value over time out of your customers. So they might pay $10 a month. Like if you think about famous software companies like Xero or something, you pay a monthly subscription fee. They probably don't make money on you in the first 1, 2, or 3 months because they spent money to get you onboard you. They spent money with the salesperson talking to you on the phone. There's a cost to acquire a customer. And so for our clients, there's a whole different set of metrics that traditional businesses wouldn't need to use to figure out, is how much I'm spending to get my customers worth the long-term outcomes? And so that's sort of, you're then looking at things like lifetime value, so figuring out how much they contribute to your business over time versus how much it costs you to acquire them. And there's north of 100 of these metrics out there that everyone has a different take on, but there's probably a key 5 to 10 that most of our clients really need to be dialed up on.
Yeah, and not every business advisor or finance function is kind of set up to understand and to optimize for this, right? Like it's super specialized and super high risk. Like if you get it a little bit wrong, like if you're default dead, it's very hard to keep going.
Yeah, definitely. And that's often an issue we see with a new client. They come in and they haven't had that industry expertise. And so they're just looking at the wrong numbers. Sometimes they've even got investors or board members who are kind of pushing them to look at more traditional metrics. And if you're not thinking about your next capital raise early and optimizing those metrics to be able to convince investors it's Series A, Series B, Series C, that we do have a long-term business. We need some capital to get there, but we do have the unit economics to make this work. So if you're not looking at it early and you're focusing on the wrong things, it can really create a problem for you later.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll dig into a little bit more of some of these things, but I think maybe just to like round out the intro really is like this stat that I saw in the great chat that you guys did with Troy on We Fucking Love Startups about the fact that 97% of the companies you've worked with are going strong and doing really well compared to the general failure rate of startups being about 90% after 5 years. I mean, that's wild. Like, and that's wild, especially because all of these are defaulted companies. Like, if they don't keep raising money, they die. So that's adding an extra kind of degree of difficulty on top of the general business thing. What do you think has made it that you have such a good record? Like, are you turning people away? Do you pick people very carefully, or is it just like you help people succeed more?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a whole lot of elements, and definitely we can't take credit for all of that. I think the ones that come to us are already in the cohort of hopefully successful clients. They've typically raised capital already. They are aware of finances. They're aware of their own need for that finances. So some of that actually, maybe a big cohort of the people that do fail don't even get to that realization. And then part of what we can contribute to is providing that information to make better decisions. And so often we'll see companies before they're working with us making decisions. Can we hire someone? Yeah, we just raised $1 million. We can hire heaps of people. And they'll just go out and not really think about what is that person contributing to our business. A big part of what we're doing is providing information to say, yeah, you can hire that person. Here's what it does to your cash runway. Oh, you were going to run out of money in May. Now you're going to run out of money in February. And by the way, you can't raise money from November to February in New Zealand because of Christmas shutdown. So actually your runway's gone from May to August, September, October, and that's like a massive difference for a lot of people. So helping them be aware of those impacts of their decisions, I think is a massive contributor. And so often with our clients, every month we're talking about what does the scenario look like? Yes, you've spoken about this contract that's coming up that you're going to close. What happens if it doesn't? What happens if you do hire that person? What if their growth rate's not what you think? A lot of our clients naturally are really optimistic. You'll see growth curves of revenue always going upwards to the right. And our role is often being the devil's advocate and saying, cool, if you do that, awesome. We're going to raise lots of money. You're going to grow. You're going to exit, and you're going to be wonderfully rich. But what happens if actually growth rates are more in line with what they have been in the last 12 months? Oh, yeah, that curve comes right down. Suddenly you do need money next year or whatever it is. So helping them frame up those scenarios and a whole range of things.
Yeah, and like compounding factors like recurring revenue, cost per acquisition, like a couple of points either way on both of those, and suddenly, churn, like the number of customers leaving, that goes up a couple of points, and suddenly you can go from beautiful metrics to horrible metrics, right? Like not a lot has to go wrong.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things we see where a lot of people don't realize that customer acquisition costs actually will go up over time. As you grow, your acquisition cost normally will go up. It can be a common thought that, no, it'll come down. We'll have better brand and people know us better, so it'll actually be cheaper to acquire customers, but typically it will go up. You've got the low-hanging fruit, you've tapped out your networks in New Zealand, and then suddenly you're trying to sell overseas, and the cost of hiring a sales team in the US, for example, is huge. And unless you are planning for that, unless you've raised enough capital for that, it can be a real big challenge. And so helping give them that information to show, here's your metrics and here's your cash runway and here's what your business looks like in 3 years' time with these metrics. But actually, like you say, what if we just tweak those metrics a little bit, make them a little bit worse, just to be conservative? Suddenly can be quite a different business and helps them realize, actually maybe we do need to raise more capital, or maybe we do need to be prepared to raise capital sooner than what we thought, or just be quite cost aware. And a lot of companies go to the US and spend a lot of money very quickly. And so helping them be aware of that and keep it in check.
Yeah, and today you work with more than 100 companies and have, 50 plus staff. But how did you get started, and how did you decide to specialize in this high growth SaaS kind of world?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in sort of startups and entrepreneurship. Even at school, I was doing Young Enterprise Scheme and always had little side hustles going. Went to university, did accounting, did what most accountants do and joined a Big Four accounting firm at PwC. And in my first week at PwC, I rang my dad, who used to be an accountant and then ran his own businesses after that, and said to my dad, what have I done? I've got an accounting degree. I'm at the world's biggest accounting firm, and I hate accounting. This is so boring. And he said, look, you can't quit your graduate job in your first week. And you can't quit your graduate job in your first year. Just look bad on your CV, and you haven't really given it a chance. So I was like, fair enough. So then I handed in my resignation on my 1 year anniversary at PwC to join a startup. So that was the Hyper Factory, which is Derek Hanley's original business. And suddenly within a week of working there, I was like, I love accounting. Yeah. This is awesome. And it went from being the traditional accounting, backward looking, at PwC, and it's changed a bit since then. So I'm not bagging PwC, but my role at that time was doing year-end accounts 6 months after the fact, purely to tick a box to do a tax return for a small to medium-sized business. Suddenly I went to the Hyper Factory and I was looking forwards and I was helping the board, the management team, the whole company make better decisions, understand what clients are making money, what type of clients should be they're focusing on. And suddenly I could see the impact of what I was doing in real time being relevant. So that really suddenly re-engaged my interest in accounting, I guess. And had a few other roles, moved to London, actually went back to a bank just because that's what accountants do in London, make some good money contracting. But within a year or so, I kind of remembered why I hated corporate accounting. So left that to co-found a startup in London. So I was a co-founder of a startup there, and I was the finance guy, went in as the CFO, but quickly realized that we raised money, set up the systems, realized that a very early stage startup doesn't need a CFO. It's a pretty small function once you go through these big peaks. So through that, I kind of moved roles into being the COO as well, so doing operations, and did that for a few years, and we exited and moved back to New Zealand, and kind of fell into it a little bit. I was really wanted to work in startups. I'd just done my own startup, so I was pretty burnt out, and I was like, I don't want to co-found a startup myself again. Definitely didn't want to go back into corporate, and I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And a friend of mine was looking at raising capital, and he reached out. He's like, "Oh, you guys raise capital in your startup? Like, can we get some help?" And went to have a session with him, and he showed me the pitch deck and went through it. It was a beautiful pitch deck, explained the problem, all the stuff really well. Got to the end, and there wasn't a single dollar symbol in the pitch deck, any numbers or anything. And I was like, "Oh, cool. What about the numbers? Like, how much money you're raising? How long is it going to last you?" And he was like, "I don't know." So did a crash course, helped them model out their cash runway, their profit and loss forecast and things. And at the end of that, he was like, "This is amazing. This is exactly what we needed." But we literally didn't know who to ask. Like, no one knew what to do. So this is amazing. I've got some friends who need some help. Can you help them? And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I helped them. And I was just doing this free because I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And help their friends. And they said, "This is great. We've got some other friends who need some help." And I was like, "Oh, so maybe there's a business in supporting these companies." And yeah, so Oxygen was born from that. For maybe a year or 2 or 3 years, I guess, it was just me. Just like I was essentially consulting to startups. And I was really focusing on the stuff that I was excited by, helping with capital raising, helping with reporting to their board, reporting to the investors. But more and more, these early clients were saying, "This is great, but can Oxygen also do our payroll? And can Oxygen also do our bookkeeping?" And maybe not realizing that it was just me. I was like, yeah. Oxygen.
Were you running like 4 different email addresses? Like accounts at Oxygen, admin at Oxygen, like that's always a good one.
Susie at Oxygen. So yeah, I was up at night learning how to do payroll, learning how to do bookkeeping, and it was actually a really good experience. I was working right across their startups, doing everything in their finance function. So I learned everything from the ground up. And yeah, kind of about 3 years in, got to a stage where I was at capacity, and I guess I had the decision: do I want to keep growing? Do I just want to work with this handful of startups? Do I actually want to pick one of these startups to go full time with? And yeah, decided to make a business out of it and started hiring the right people for the right roles. And as much as I loved doing payroll at 10 o'clock at night, I'm not the best payroll officer. And so, yeah, just decided to start hiring the right people for the right roles and building a team around that.
Tell us about your path in, Mike.
Yeah. So I, similar to Matt, I studied accounting, went into Fonterra, so went into the thing that I could find that wasn't an accounting firm, but still used my background. And I think my experience there, I worked in mergers and acquisitions at Fonterra, which I quite liked the work. Terrible hours, but great, really interesting work buying and selling companies. But there, like what I found and again, this is not to bag Fonterra, but there's a lot of like older people there. It's sort of you punch and get your paycheck, go. Not everyone, but there is people there, like quite a lot of people there like that, like every big company. And I found that sort of like I didn't find like there is a good purpose to that business, but I personally wasn't very tied to the purpose, and that's what I was missing. I moved to London after 5 years there. I worked at a travel tech startup there, which I loved. It was exactly the same sort of thing Matt is describing, where you're like, wow, I'm actually part of this. I love what we're doing. I'm a much bigger part of the machine, but the machine is much smaller, and I'm actually helping drive outcomes. And so I knew when I returned to New Zealand that I didn't want to work in a big company. I wanted to stay in tech. I love tech. It's a great place to work. If anyone wants to change industry, pick a tech company. And I met Matt through a variety of connections, and sort of what he was doing then, I was like, I have to work with this guy and learn from this guy. And I definitely want to stay in technology. And there seems to be a budding tech ecosystem here, but it's very hard. When I first returned and asked people, oh, what's the tech scene like in New Zealand, I didn't get a lot of responses. This was probably 6 or so years ago, so it's changed a bit. There's definitely it's a bit more visible today, but back then it wasn't. And so that was how I met Matt, and got stuck into oxygen, and now it's my longest job ever held.
Well, I absolutely like that story that both of you tell of being in traditional workplaces and then coming to tech, and oh man, it's just so much better. And you do want to say to people, like, there's almost like this like dangerous misconception that the only tech jobs are engineers and you have to have a hoodie and ramen and Monster energy drinks and stuff, right? But there is, actually, I don't know, maybe it's 40% of a company is the engineers in an engineering heavy company. Then there's everything else, finance, admin, marketing, there's just so many kind of different functions of a business that you get to live tech jobs without having to actually code, right?
Exactly. And I think a big part of that as well, what Mike touched on, is the awesome part about all the people we work with. They're all so passionate about what they do. And most of the people we work with, almost all of them, are really smart people who have given up a really secure job somewhere. They could go get a job working at Fonterra, they're all really smart people, but they're so passionate about this problem that they're solving. And working with people like that every day is like awesome. It's working with purpose-led companies who are solving a problem and they're just so passionate about what they do. It's really awesome.
And big organizations and companies that are like really slow moving are built to have stasis, not to have too much change. While high growth companies, you can do anything, make a new job every few months, right? And it's not for everyone, but amazing.
They literally change their whole business model, like some of them every few months. So it's, it changes quickly.
Yeah, and just to round out the first part, so as you mentioned before, Matt, there's not enough work for a CFO in the early days, but if you set things up the right way, someone else can run it. But if you don't set things up and manage them the right way, things can go pretty sketchy pretty quickly. So what kind of just to paint a picture of if someone comes to you, how does a CFO partner work? What kind of things do you set up, and then how do you manage along the way?
Yeah, probably one of the earliest things is making sure you're structuring your chart of accounts properly. So there's some really important buckets of costs for our clients. So separating out the costs of R&D, separating out the costs of go-to-market, so that's sales and marketing, separating out the costs of the cost to serve, because those three buckets drive a huge amount of all the metrics that you're looking at. So cost to serve, for example, is what is the cost of keeping your platform up and supporting your customers, which drives your gross margins. And when you go to raise capital from Series A onwards, gross margin is probably one of the most important things that those investors will look at. And if you're not reporting accurately, you're actually often misrepresenting your numbers, or you can't even answer the question, what's your gross margin? Same with your go-to-market costs, which is your sales team, your marketing team, all the spend you do on digital spend and marketing. That drives your metrics around what is your average cost of acquisition, and all those metrics that Mike spoke about at the start. So if you don't have your account set up, and for example, the biggest example of that is a lot of companies will just put all their salaries into one salaries bucket, which probably sits in general and admin. If you're not splitting your salaries out across those buckets, for most of our clients, salaries is their biggest cost. It's probably 80% of their cost, if not more. If they're not splitting it out, it's just they can't report on anything. And so it's setting up that chart of accounts and then doing the work regularly to make sure that you're reporting on those buckets accurately. That's probably one of the most important foundational things. And then understanding what we said earlier around those metrics. And sometimes the metrics right now will look terrible, but it's showing the pathway from now to 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years away, and showing that with scale, this will work, this will start to make money. So setting that up from day one and reporting those from day one.
Yeah, and there's that, very famous but incredibly true adage that you manage what you measure, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And the earlier you start measuring the right things and forecasting in the right way, the better everyone can be, right?
Exactly, yeah. And another example of that is a lot of our clients are invoicing their customers in a mix of ways. So they might be invoicing some customers annually in advance. They might be invoicing other customers on credit card every month. And it's really important that you understand the cash flow impact of that. If you've got a customer who pays you a $500,000 contract once a year, you need to make sure your cash flow has that timing right, because you're not going to have money coming in for another 11 months, for example. But at the same time, you need to be showing your ARR or your MRR, your monthly recurring revenue, with that spread out over the year. So none of it's like super complicated, but it's just stuff you need to be aware of that often companies aren't aware of, that you just need to keep an eye on.
Awesome. Let's come back in a moment and chat about what you've observed makes for a good company and the best way to build one. Hey, so it's a really kind of sensitive kind of situation, right, as well, if you are the people who are the closest to the business's finances and have the most real picture. And as you mentioned before, like a lot of these founders are kind of, very optimistic and want to see the best version of reality. But if the numbers don't tell the right story and aren't real, then nothing's going to go. How do you balance, and maybe go to you on this, Mike, how do you balance the role of helping to be the realist, but also working with these people to help them kind of make the right decisions?
Yeah, it can be tricky. I will say, like, quite a few founders actually do have the opposite. Like, we do describe them, they are optimists. You have to be an optimist to found a tech company with a high chance of failure. But a lot of them get down on themselves time to time, where they think like, things aren't good. I'm not growing as fast as I was last year. Things aren't going as well. My investors are giving me a hard time. And for us, we have the benefit of seeing a portfolio of companies, actually seeing that they're not nearly as in bad shape as what they think, and that they have other options. And so it's sort of giving them a bit of perspective, I think, sometimes. Like, sometimes the best founders with amazing companies will be gutted at how things are going. And it's just giving them sort of a reality check of, you're actually doing really well. Like, you can keep your head up and we'll get through this. And I've seen companies in much, much worse shape get through it. And so you can do it too. So giving them some perspective. We play like a bit of a role of like therapist and CFO sometimes. You kind of are the person that they can talk to about hard things. Like, you can't even talk to, I don't know, one of your early hires about some of the things that are going on behind the scenes, because it might be that, we can't make payroll in 2 weeks' time. Like, what are we going to do? You don't really want to tell your employees that that's what's about to happen, because like a logical employee is like, cool, I'm going to jump on Seek and go find another option. But you do need someone to talk to and work through the problem. And like, they'll find a way through. People always find a way through, but just having someone to bounce to, be the therapist as well as someone who actually understands the numbers to help them through it is pretty important.
Yeah. And from seeing people as they respond to those really hard things, right? Like, what are some of the things that you've observed that are the really good character, traits that a founder can have? And what are some of the things where you go, uh-oh?
Yeah. One thing I think is a bit of a misconception is that you have to be an asshole to succeed as a CEO. And I actually think it's the opposite. I think all the most successful clients we've had, the founders are hugely empathetic. They are really passionate about people and culture. They are really driven by a purpose, which isn't about like successful exits and about raising more capital and things. It's around, I'm creating jobs, I'm solving a problem that's like good for the world or whatever it is. And yeah, I think it's a common misconception. I think that you have to be this really cutthroat, black and white operator, or even that sort of like alpha personality, when often it's actually the opposite, where all of our clients, I think, are awesome to work with. They care about their team. And often that's the thing that you end up being a counsellor about is they are so stressed about letting people down and around whether that's their investors, whether it's their staff. And unfortunately, it has been a thing in the last couple of years where we have had to help clients figure out restructures. So 2021, we went through a lot of forecasting. We were just adding in hire after hire, and it was awesome. And then it suddenly switched to having to help our clients build like plans. We have to remove 20% of headcount. And seeing our clients go through that is obviously it's really difficult like situations to go through, but I think that's where we see the hugely empathetic side of our clients come through.
Yeah, it's it can be quite, I don't know what the word, like it's not cutthroat probably. It is like to grow a tech company. It's hard work, and you have to make pretty. You're running a business, and so you're a good person, and you really you're the person on the other end of something, and you're having to make a hard decision like a restructure because it's the right thing for the business. It doesn't necessarily come naturally to them. But by the same token, the really awesome founders that we work with, I think, are people who listen. They're really engaged. They when there's a problem, their immediate reaction isn't to just blame someone and crack down. It's how do we solve this? People who are problem solvers first, and are even to the point where I've seen people make huge errors and founders jump on it, and they're not their first reaction isn't how the hell does this happen? What's wrong? Why did you do this? It's actually, okay, well, what do we need to do to fix this? And I've been on phone calls at midnight with the founder, working through complicated problem, how we're going to explain this to the board, how we're going to move forward, and coming up with a plan. But that's their first reaction. Really good founders, that's the first reaction.
Yeah, I love that. And that idea of not being assholes to win. I mean, I remember I was at Vend when the whole kind of Uber kind of vibes were out. And I remember Vaughan Ferguson standing up and going, hey, well, we just don't think you need to be assholes to run a good company. And that's just not what we do here. And I was like, I love this.
Yeah.
This is so cool. And again, going through a restructure there. And, it was really hard on that senior group of people because, in many cases, they were the ones that chose to open the office in the place that didn't work. And then other people are getting fired and everyone felt terrible,
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of that kind of capital raising process as well, because it's so vital to these companies, and you're in there helping companies plan, what kind of frameworks do you go to founders with around how much they should be thinking to dilute themselves and what kind of things they can be doing to help across the rounds? As a few points of equity here and there can be huge in the long run, right?
Yeah. So there's sort of a big capital raise that most companies ideally do called a Series A. And that raise is usually we've figured out somewhat product market fit and we're raising a good amount of money to try and scale this thing. And ideally, when you do that raise, you'll raise a bunch of money, might raise $10 million. And afterwards, you'll have half your company left as the founder or founding team or key staff. That's where you're trying to get to. It's not some people have a great time and they wind up with still holding 80% or all of the company at that point. But a lot of people, it's a bit more rocky road. You had to pivot, you had to raise more capital than ideally you would have liked to get there. Things you can do along the way to make sure you're set up for success is it's not raise too much or too little. There's in the early rounds, the most common, I think, one of the most common mistakes people make is not raising enough capital. People sort of come from a very bootstrapped, tight mindset where they, go into they're used to having no money, and so they're with whatever $500,000, I could get to a really significant milestone. And the reality is, you do need more money than you think. Things don't go as soon as something doesn't go to plan. You'll need more money to adjust and figure it out. And you don't want to be about to run out of money as soon as one thing doesn't work. So raising enough capital is probably one of the key pieces. But at the same time, you don't want to take more capital than you definitely need because that just sets you up for dilution. I'd just say the former is much more common, is that you don't raise enough.
Yeah, and that's one of the first things we're doing with our clients who are on that capital raising journey is helping build a financial model which is essentially helping them figure out how much money do I need. And we'll build buffers into that. Obviously, in a perfect world, every salesperson you hire hits their sales metrics. Every single dollar you spend on marketing drives a customer acquisition. But we'll be building a forecast that factors in some allowances that maybe 1 in 3 of your salespeople actually will not work out, or whatever it is, to help give that founder that clear view of how much money do I actually need. And that's changed a little bit as well. It used to be, how much money do I need to raise to last 18 months? And then we'll just raise more money. It has changed a little bit in the last year or two to be how much money do I need to raise to either hit milestones to then raise more money, or get us to a position where we can get to break even and not need to raise more money. So that kind of comes down to sort of founder ambition and founder preference and things. But having that plan of how much money do we need is actually the first step, I think, in helping figure that out.
With 100 plus companies, and a very large percentage of those being kind of, absolute leaders, you must have this amazing weather vane for where things are going and things like the impact of AI on the number of customer service representatives or engineers or, all of these things. What kind of themes are you seeing there with the advent of, more and more AI tools being brought into people's jobs?
I think efficiency is the big one, right? It's not necessarily you don't need functions or that they completely replace things, but you should be way more efficient ideally. People are still figuring out the tools and how they use them, but go-to-market's a great example. So how you sell and market your product. We were talking about it on having coffee this morning. There's a company called Lovable, which is an AI company, and I think their ARR per FTE is it's $1 million or something US. And so you can build companies like that now that are extremely efficient because you can leverage tools like this that just do a lot of the manual stuff that usually it was, high value employees, might be your key salesperson is in there doing data entry or doing tasks that now an agent is just doing on their behalf. So I think that's probably the movement. There's still so many tools and it's so cluttered that it's pretty hard to assess which things you need, and some of them are super expensive. So you're trying to value is this $100,000 a year tool going to deliver that back in value? And they all claim they will, but how do you assess that? So it's a bit of trial and error, and just trying and pick a few things is probably what I see people doing well is they pick a couple and give them an actual go rather than pick there's also people who just pick every shiny object off the shelf and then realize how expensive it all is and can't tell what things are working and what aren't.
Yeah, I was the victim of that actually recently, where got some LinkedIn advertising for this amazing AI agent that was going to solve a whole lot of problems and help us be way more efficient. Started doing a trial and I was about to sign up, and then the next day the website was just gone. And it's that's my concern right now, is that there's a lot of people who can spin up this AI tool really quickly, test it in the market and see what the traction is. And if it doesn't work, they've got 6 other products they're testing as well. And I'm nervous at the moment of building a function around some tool that you don't have control of, and then finding out next week that person's decided that's not what they want to do and they just close it. So I definitely think right now I'd be more inclined, if I was a tech startup, to be building tools that you're building around improving efficiency and not relying on third-party tools at the moment.
Yeah, how interesting. And your journey as a business as well has mirrored the growth of many of your businesses, right? You've grown and scaled to 50 plus people, which is a really significant business. If you're in a services business as well, right? That's an enormous amount of work to make that all run. Tell us about how you've gone about growing and scaling your company, and I guess attracting the right kind of, because you've got a absolute A-team of these CFO partners. How do you attract the entrepreneurial accountants and the people that love the space?
Yeah, there's definitely a Venn diagram of accountants and people interested in tech, and it's a very small overlap in the middle. So it is hard to find the people that are great accountants and are really excited to work in a very chaotic environment. Because those two things, accountants and chaos, are kind of polar opposites in a lot of ways. And this has changed a lot. And probably coming back to something you spoke on earlier is us seeing how people operate. Me and Mike would go to 10 or 12 board meetings a month. We're working across these really awesome companies. And that's something that I've been really grateful for, is seeing how these companies operate, how they attract staff. And you touched on Auror earlier, which is for me, the shining light of building a people and culture function from day one. And I remember they were one of my earliest clients. And I remember in those early days thinking, Phil and Tom, and they brought in Kirsty quite early, and I was like, that's a big call, and you've done that much money to be investing into people and culture, But that just set them up for success right through to now, and having that really early focus on culture when there was only 6 of them. And being able to pick up those sorts of things from so many awesome companies and like great leaders has been really impactful for me. So that's something we've really focused on is people and culture, and over investing into the recruitment process, which can be a real challenge when you're growing and you've got team that are really busy and you're trying to hire, and it's difficult to find people. Do you hire this person who's okay, or like you kind of think, yeah, we could make it work, versus holding out for the person that as soon as like you've met them and you go through the process, you're like, yeah, that person's an absolute like fit, and having the sort of, I guess, courage to wait for that right person. And so, yeah, hiring has been a massive focus on ours. And interestingly, more and more, we've got more team coming from the likes of Vend and other interesting tech startups, which isn't actually critical for us. Like, we've got awesome team members who have come from all over the place. And that's actually probably another thing that we've done is being quite diverse in where our team have come from. We don't have a ideal employee profile when they join us. We've got people who've been in tech startups. We've got people who've come from professional services. We've got one of our team was a barman before he joined us, and it's sort of around finding the people that fit the culture that you're trying to build and can add to that and can contribute.
Yeah, just like good operators, like where do you find them? We're also quite lucky now. I think we used to have to hire, we'd be posting a job ad to find a CFO if you go back in time. I don't know I can't even remember the last CFO we hired through a job ad. It'd been at least 2 years ago, I think. We now have like quite a good network reputation, and people are like, you have to meet this person because they're really awesome and they're like a finance person and they're interested in what you're doing, and they put us in touch. And so that's usually how we hire, especially at the top level. We just find people who are passionate in the space, and now it's kind of oxygen's a big enough thing that they kind of we get connected somehow. And those are always the best people.
Yeah, 8 years ago, we were having to explain who is Oxygen, what is virtual CFO, what is the tech scene, like those 3 things. And finding someone who had worked in finance and knew anything about tech was impossible. And seeing how far the industry has come in the last 10 years, I saw a chart that I think Robbie Paul from the Icehouse Ventures put up recently around the amount of capital raised over the last 10 years by year. And the chart is just upwards to the right. And so 8 years ago, we were having to explain all those things. Now people are coming to us, they've worked in the sector or they're very interested in it. They know about capital raising, they know about all the VCs, and they know about us. And so it's quite a different journey.
So people who want an off-ramp from boring jobs should get in touch with you, right?
Hit us up. We're always hiring.
And tell us about Australia quickly as well, and that I think it's so cool that, again, mirroring the best of the companies that you work with, that you've expanded into Australia to offer this service to their high-growth ecosystem.
Yeah, so I think we knew that we're getting bigger and bigger in New Zealand, and at some point we'll tap that market out a little bit, and we want to keep growing. Like, it's interesting that Matt started off saying like he returned from London not wanting to found another startup, and that's effectively what he did.
Yeah.
And so now we're on a growth trajectory. We want to keep growing, and we want to do more of what we're really good at. So some of the when you talk to people about this, people who maybe aren't as much in our space, but we're sort of like, oh, why don't you add on like HR or legal or adjacent offerings, or why don't you serve companies that are like, oh, that'd be great. I've got a manufacturing business that we could use you on. Can you help us there? But we're not necessarily. We're probably not very. We wouldn't be as differentiated or as good at that. We're probably less interested in it. And so the option here was like, do we broaden our offering, or do we just like go to Australia where there's 5 times as many of the types of companies we want to work with, and do more of what we're really good at? And so that was it was an easy call for me, Matt, and Chris. That sounded much more fun. And then we went over there on a visit and realised like both Melbourne and Sydney have a bigger tech ecosystem than the whole of New Zealand, so you could pick either market. And we were sold. The weather's good in Sydney, so Chris went there.
Yeah.
And the other part of that as well is that a lot of our clients have raised capital from Australian investors already. So, and then a lot of our clients also have a subsidiary in Australia. And so we already had good networks in Australia through the Investor Network. A lot of our clients already needed our support in Australia. And so it just made a lot of sense to move that way.
Well, can't wait to see the growth there. And as a kind of final thought, like, right, from my perspective, it's kind of a badge of a good company that someone uses Oxygen advisors. Like, in my world is working across like VC and venture-backed companies. If you see that someone's got you on board, you're like, okay, well, they'll have their stuff sorted and that's all going to be legit. And we don't have to worry about that, which is a pretty amazing thing to have come to mean to, people in the ecosystem. But as a kind of final thought, like, what will success be for you? It's like that feels like a really cool kind of success for you personally, and with the work that you're doing with Oxygen. It's kind of like, it's more than just being a partner if you're helping grow these companies, right?
Yeah, I think, well, maybe we both touch on it, but for me, it's seeing our clients succeed is a big one for me. Like, one of the things that also differentiates us from probably a traditional accountant is that we care deeply about our clients and what we do. And so, seeing them succeed, but also our team. So we've built, like we said, a team of almost 50 people, creating opportunities for them. Like, part of the reason to grow Oxygen is not just because we love what we do. We want to help New Zealand have a much higher, better jobs, create a better economy. That is all very important, and we need it. New Zealand needs that. But it's also about the people that we work with day in, day out, and creating opportunity for them. So I think it's kind of a mix of it. Client success, growing the New Zealand economy, and creating jobs that I want my kids to be able to, I want my kids to be able to go look for a job and be like, oh, there's a plethora of incredible jobs I could go do, rather than being like, oh, I could be a realtor, or I could work on a farm or something. Like, nothing wrong with those professions, but I just want more of those high value jobs in New Zealand. But yes, is like on the other side of it, I would just want to see our team succeed, and the great people we work with have great careers as well.
Yeah, and just to expand on that sort of New Zealand part of it, tech is now the second largest export in New Zealand after dairy, and it's on track to be the biggest by 2030 or something like that. And for me, that's awesome that we can start exporting basically the code out of our smartest people's brains rather than a physical product, whether that's forestry or milk or any of those primary products, and create an economy of really high value jobs that is going to create awesome things in New Zealand, and create an economy that we're really excited to be part of.
That's so cool. And, you've helped raise more than $500 million for the startups you work with, and working with 100 plus of our best startups who will create thousands of jobs in the long term.
Well, their last part is the most important part. Like, I'm less excited by the fact that we've raised $500 million. Mm-hmm. I'm more excited by what that means for New Zealand and the amount of capital that creates for everyone, right from investors through to the employees and the founders, but also just creating, if you translate that into the number of jobs that have been created in New Zealand, Australia, the US, and the return on the New Zealand economy that money is doing, that's what really excites me.
Yeah, well, it's really happening, and I can't wait. I can't wait to see what you make happen next. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt and Mike.
Great, thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Matt Dold and Mike Mandis of Oxygen Advisors. Thank you to everyone who helps make the podcast happen, like our producer, Te Aihe Butler. And thank you for having us along in your ears and listening. If you do like what we do, please do rate and leave a review. It really does help. E noho rā.